everybody. We're on chapter 15. I see things as they really are. Nothing is guaranteed to pack 'em in like a kid's show. The Lock Community Center was jammed with little stars and their extended families. Some of the performers had entourages that would put an A-list movie star to shame. Cars were jammed in the parking lot so tightly that it seemed as though they had crashed. Body heat pulsed in waves through the hall's open windows. Red had texted his backup singers, and they met us at the stage door in full 60s regalia. Luckily, the costumes had already been prepared, so all the Sharkies had to worry about were the hairdos. Jeannie's hair was piled high atop her head in a rock-hard beehive. She wore a spangled mini dress with elbow-length gloves and heels so high they looked like little ski ramps. Herod was there too, in black sunglasses and stick-on sideburns. "You really look the part," I said, trying to be friendly. Harold swiveled his hips and shot me with 2 finger guns. "Well, thank you very much. All you need is get me inside. After that, go on with your act as normal. I need to watch May, make sure nothing happens to her." Red frowned. "I've been thinking about that, Half Moon. Nothing really happened to May." I knew that Red was thinking, and I wanted to nip it in the bud. Her lucky dress was burned red. I call that something. All that did was buy her sympathy. She's still in the competition. And that dress never did bring her luck, did it? I put on my best aghast face, which is not easy underneath layers of fake tan and shoe polish. "What are you saying, Red? That May did all this to win a competition? She sabotaged her friends and burned her own dress all for a little trophy?" "Maybe. How well do you know her?" "Well enough. I study people, Red. That's what I do. She helped us, didn't she? She saved Herod." Red stuck his chin out belligerently. "Yes, well, maybe you've been studying May a bit too hard. Maybe you're getting romantic ideas." My cheeks burned hot enough to melt the shoe polish. "She's just a kid, for heaven's sake." Red surprised himself and me by backing off. "All right, calm down. It's a possibility, that's all. You're supposed to look at every possibility. You told me that, Fletcher." It was true. I had quoted the Bernstein manual, but May being behind all this wasn't even a possibility, was it? And why not? Because I liked May? Because I trusted her? I dismissed the niggling doubts. I could think about this later when May was safe and Red had called me Fletcher. The Cork officer John Cassidy was plonked outside the stage door, extra security because of the threat from deranged escapees. He sat on a bar stool, arms folded across his chest. His eyes were glazed with boredom, but he jerked up when he saw Red approaching. "Look who it is, Elvis and the Freak Show." "You're suspended, Red. You've about as much chance of getting in here as an ex-wielding psychopath. And Mert is looking for you, by the way." Red said nothing, simply handed Cassidy his cell phone. The officer placed the receiver to his ear, which is almost impossible not to do if someone hands you the phone. "Hello?" "Hello," said a male voice. "Who is this?" Cassidy stood. "This is Officer John Cassidy. Who is this?" "This is Brendan O'Kelly Reardon, the Sharkies lawyer. I believe you are denying my clients their constitutional rights by refusing them access to a public performance at which they are registered to perform." Cassidy sniffed. "I have my orders." "That's all very well, but your orders are invalid. If you persist on enforcing them, then you will be named in the lawsuit. Cassidy's head snapped back a fraction. Lawsuit? Of course, lawsuit. You are traumatizing my client. You are stunting his mental growth. You are fostering antisocial behavior. Just ask young Red how traumatized he is. Officer Cassidy covered the mouthpiece with a faint hand. Hey, Red, how traumatized are you? Red's face grew long and weary. Very, about 10 grand's worth at a guess. Of course, if I cry in court, it could be 20. Cassidy tossed him the phone. I need to go over there for a minute because of a suspicious noise that I just heard. If someone were to sneak in while I'm away, it's hardly my fault, is it? Red pocketed the phone. Hardly, he said, leading the way into the hall. We filed past Officer Cassidy. On this occasion, even Herod managed to keep his trap shut. Cassidy was on a hair trigger, and one smart remark could have the lot of us thrown out on our ears. As I squeezed past his belly, Cassidy laid a hand on my shoulder. Keep an eye out for Fletcher Moon, Watson. He's a psychopath, that one. Mark my words. Don't worry, officer, I said, scratching the stubble on my brow to hide my face. Eyes peeled, that's me. I breathed a quiet sigh of relief as I sidled into the hall. Obviously, Mert hadn't spread the word that Watson Sharkey was actually Fletcher Moon. Maybe he was giving me the benefit of the doubt, or maybe he wanted to catch me himself. The Lock Community Center's backstage area was jammed with bodies. Officer Cassidy seemed to have let in more than he kept out. Proud mothers combed their daughters' hair, pushy dads glared at rivals, contestants, and wannabe pop stars swayed around us as though they were already double platinum. I couldn't see May anywhere. Okay, I said, eyes darting like a nervous deer. You guys get ready to go on. I'll look for May to warn her, or tip her off, mumbled Red. I ignored the comment. I couldn't deal with the possibility that May could be behind this. I liked her. Emotion is the enemy of truth. Bernstein again. But I couldn't peel off my feelings like a Band-Aid. I was a real person, not a collection of words on a page. Jeannie tossed me one plastic shopping bag and another to Red. Put these costumes on. We're supposed to be performing. I was about to object. There was no time for costumes, but I realized that I wouldn't be of any use to May if every adult in authority stopped me to ask what I was doing backstage. We ducked behind a wishing well constructed from cardboard boxes. Red's costume was from Elvis's Vegas period, a white jumpsuit complete with silver cummerbund and cloak. My own clothes were from the movie Jailhouse Rock and consisted of a black canvas suit and a striped shirt. They were tailored to fit Red, and so I had to turn up the legs and sleeves. Red swirled the silk-lined cloak over his shoulders. You look ridiculous, he smirked. In spite of the situation, I couldn't hold back a smile. We were conspirators on an adventure. Life was dangerous. You took your smiles when you could. And they meant more when there could be a madman lurking around every corner. I threw a punch at Red's shoulder. He allowed it to land, though he could have dodged it easily. You big bully, Half Moon. I'd have our lawyer on you if we had one. I wasn't a bit surprised to hear that there was no Sharkey family lawyer. So who was that on the phone? Papa. He does a great fancy accent. Picked it up at university. He has a degree from Trinity in philosophy. Now that was a surprise. I was learning fast not to underestimate the Sharkeys in any field. I'll meet you back here, I said, after Love Me Tender, Love Me True. Red pulled the tape off the stick-on sideburns and pasted them on his cheeks. Okay, be careful. I know you think May is the victim, but in the movies it's always the last one you suspect. This is real life, and in real life the most obvious suspect is guilty. I hurried away from before Red could point out that he and I were the most obvious suspects. I shouldered my way through the throngs of people. Every one of them knew me, and most were on the lookout for me, but I held my head high, wearing my disguise confidently. I was a Sharky now, and people may sneer behind my back, but no one would challenge me. May was not making herself easy to find. I found magicians with half-dead pigeons stuffed in their vests, a country and western bands shedding sequins from their vests with every step, and 2 jugglers who kept knocking each other over with bowling pins. But no Irish dancers. I was beginning to despair when I heard May's tap shoes banging out an irregular beat on the wooden floor. It had to be her. Nobody else could have that startling lack of rhythm. I found the noise. There she was, in the shadow of an enormous bunch of balloon grapes. She was dressed in a new black and silver dancing dress, her blonde hair draped across her shoulders. A shaft of light from an overhead window caught her tiara and spilled into 1,000 rainbows. I stopped dead. She looked perfect, too perfect to ever commit a crime, however petty. Surely there was something wrong. I studied her face for a sign of malice, but there was nothing. Just a slight, frustrated pout because her feet repeatedly refused to perform as commanded. Time and time again, the click-kick eluded her. She scissored her legs well enough, but she could never click her heels on the way down. Something stirred in the deep shadows by the wall, something darker than the shadows themselves. I peered into the darkness, zoning out the surrounding confusion. Someone was there, dressed from head to toe in black, slipping along the wall towards May. They were approaching with curiously exaggerated movements. I couldn't think of an innocent explanation for this behavior. This person was obviously the criminal mastermind moving in on his final target. My stomach lurched and my heart pumped as though a fist was tightening around it. My mouth automatically opened to call for Red, but I checked the impulse. There was no time. I would have to handle this myself. I was not an expert in the field of direct action, preferring to point my police contacts at the criminals. But there was no time for channels now. I had to move. The figure glided closer to its target, its movements fluid yet angular. Bigger than me, much bigger, but I wouldn't need to contain the suspect, just knock him to the ground. The dark figure raised its hands, curled its fingers into claws like a TV vampire. Move, I told myself, now or never. I did move as though in a daydream. My brain couldn't believe what my feet were doing. I had no idea how to attack someone. There was no chapter on that in the Bernstein manual. I simply barreled forward. To the casual observer, my attack surely resembled a prolonged stumble. I had read books about detectives tackling suspects. These fiction characters are always expert in several forms of martial art, having spent at least a decade training on a mountaintop in the Far East. I have had no such training. The biggest thing I had ever tackled was a jar of pickled onions that refused to be opened. I decided to add some noise to my attack, to distract the shadowy figure. I intended to roar in a predatory fashion, but instead squealed like a boiling kettle. The noise worked. The figure twirled its head sharply, just in time to see a pint-sized, red-haired Elvis hurtling in his direction. He had time for a brief yelp, then I crashed into him, and we tumbled on the wooden floor in a tangle of thrashing limbs. May screamed, jumped out of her path. We rolled for a few feet until a low bench halted our progress. I crawled out from under the suspect who was examining his elbow and crying bitterly. Not typical arch criminal behavior. May stepped back and frowned. What are you doing? I stopped. I stood gasping. It's me, Fletcher. He did it, all of it. We have him. May frowned. Fletcher? That's you? That was you at the oil tank? Yes, I said urgently. I thought April was behind everything, but I was wrong. This is the criminal right here. It's all about the talent show. I don't think so, Fletcher, said May. David couldn't hurt a butterfly. I'm a pacifist, sobbed David, rubbing his elbow. I thought my heart would burst with exertion and excitement. But he was creeping towards you, dressed in black. You don't have to be a detective. We were both rehearsing over here. David is a mime. A mime? Oh, no. David glared at me. I won't be opening any invisible doors with this arm. Thanks very much. A mime? How could I have been so stupid? A crowd was gathering. Teachers were surely on the way. Perhaps Officer Cassidy. Fletcher, whispered the children. It's Fletcher Moon. I had to go now. My cover was blown. I was finished. And I knew how this would look. It would seem as though I had come here in disguise to have another go at April. Red came to my rescue again. He elbowed through the crowd and grabbed my forearm. Let's go, Watson. We are on. I allowed myself to be pulled along, though the phrase, we're on, filled me with dread. Jeanie and Herod were in the wings, chanting the vocal exercise. Dog sees, some shoes, dog eats, dog poos. I suspected they had made up this exercise themselves. Come on, said Red. We're not warmed up, protested Jeanie. Just 2 more dogs. And 2 more poos, added Herod, adjusting his sideburns. Red propelled them both on stage, dragging me along. A folk singing trio had just finished a version of Country Roads and were in the middle of their bow when we stumbled onto the stage. Behind us, the other acts swarmed into the wings. My name was on everyone's lips. Moon, the lunatic, is here, in disguise. Principal Quinn arrived on stage from the opposite wing, shooting Red a look that would have petrified a minotaur. You will pay for this later, the look promised. Well, ladies and gentlemen, she announced through a whistling mic, in a change to the advertised program, it seems as though Red Sharkey is next with his version of the Elvis classic, Love Me Tender. The stage is yours, Red, and I look forward to discussing your performance later. Principal Quinn bowed slightly, mockingly. Red grinned feebly and stepped up to the microphone, to a slight smattering of applause. The clapping was almost drowned out by a sea of buzzing as muted cell phones received text messages. The word of my presence was spreading. Red struck a pose, waiting for Jeanie to cue the mini-disc player on the stool behind her. A moment later, the sound of an Elvis backing track filled the hall. Love Me Tender, he sang in a beautiful, sultry tenor. Jeanie and Herod swayed in unison behind the second mic, bumping me on both sides. Ooh, 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 they sang. Oops, ooh, sorry, I moaned. Love me sweet. He never got past the second line because hundreds of students were pulling out their cell phones. The text jumped cricket-like from phone to phone as everyone read, then passed it on to everyone in their phone book. May's words had spread through the audience like a virus. You are not going to believe this. Half Moon is here. I knew what was happening. I felt as though my disguise was becoming slowly transparent. Students were staring at me, initially in disbelief, then with dawning realization as their brains ran a profile on my features. One little first-grade girl put her fingers on it. She stood slowly, still deciphering the message on her phone screen. I have always thought that 6 was too young for a cell phone. Now I was certain of it. That ugly boy, she said, pointing to me in case anyone was in doubt as to who exactly the ugly boy was. My phone says he's Half Moon. I expected instant chaos. I was wrong. This was such a fantastic situation, so unreal, so exciting that no one wanted it to end. My audience froze, willing me to speak. Principal Quinn and Officer Cassidy were the exceptions, but they were being held back by the throngs in the wings. They couldn't be held back forever. I had 10 seconds to solve this case. The clues whirled in my head. Red was right. There was no denying it. Only one person had benefited from each and every incident, and I had been blind not to see it. The truth hit me like a series of fireworks inside my brain. Emotions and allegiances became unimportant. Truth was truth. This is the burden of the detective. I stepped forward in a daze. Knowing something and making others believe it are two different things. My words would mean nothing unless they could be confirmed by the guilty party. I had to force a confession. Nothing else would save me. I turned quickly to Herod. I need your help, I whispered, covering the mic. Red needs it too. Herod squinted at me, and the desperation in my eyes told him that this was not the time to argue. He nodded briefly, and I whispered to him what might need to be done. A smile lit up his little face. It's the opposite of what I generally do. I pulled the microphone from its stand. It came away, trailing a ribbon of duct tape. Time to face my public. Hello, Locke, I said, smiling a watery smile. Beside me, Herod groaned, and Jeannie covered her face. I glanced across at Red. He bowed, yielding the stage to me. If I didn't pull this off, all the Sharkies were in for it, including the fake one. Someone called out from the back row, Is it really you, Half Moon? Are you really an obsessive-compulsive schizophrenic? Some people should not be allowed to watch television after 9. Yes, it is really me, I replied, my voice booming and hollow through the hall speakers. I've come here because I am innocent and I can prove it. The statement was met with a wall of cynicism. I felt like a lone archer trying to reach the walls of Troy. Still, no one rushed the stage. It was the kind of real-life adventure that people would never forget. Even Principal Quinn and Officer Cassidy were hooked. They were no longer struggling to get on stage. Instead, they elbowed their way to a decent viewing point. I had better deliver and fast. I know you all think I'm crazy. I began easing into it. Boo! Shouted an audience member. Get on with it, called another. When is the magic show coming on? Whined an elderly man in the front row. I hear there was a magician. Okay, maybe a warm-up was a bad idea. Cut to the chase. It's all about the talent show, I proclaimed, spreading my arms wide. It was a good theater. That's why I came here tonight, to protect a particular person from danger. A rustle of whispers spread through the crowd. Someone was in danger? This just got better and better. It all started 12 months ago on this very stage. Someone got beaten very badly in this competition, and someone didn't like it. I moved across the stage, and hundreds of heads swiveled to follow. So let's see who was in that competition. There was Red Sharky, the overall winner. Red shouldn't be here tonight because he got himself suspended for supposedly assaulting me. So as far as our criminal was concerned, Red was out of the picture. Which is a shame, Mama, interjected Red, 'cause I'm pretty good at what I do. This got a big laugh. Everybody loves a comedian. I shot Red a disapproving look, which he naturally ignored. Second place went to Mercedes Sharp for her Britney act. But someone stole Mercedes' karaoke mini disc, so she pulled out, presumably to concentrate on being the town gossip. Not strictly relevant, I know, but Mercedes had been poking fun at me for years. Judging by the round of applause, I wasn't the only one she had poked fun at. Jonathan Reardon and Pierce Bennett were third. They didn't enter this year because their DJ's friends' needles were stolen. No turntables, no act. I was making inroads. I could see a few thoughtful faces in the audience. Not many, but a few. Fourth place went to Seesaw Haplin. Seesaw! Howled the fifth grade at one. This happened every time his name was mentioned, which was very frustrating for his teachers and his parents, who would really prefer that everyone call him Raymond. But unfortunately, Raymond's sister was injured this year, and he was unable to continue his dance lessons. So Seesaw is out. Seesaw! Fifth place went to Gretel Bannon. She didn't enter this year because her babysitter, Mara Mernon, was tricked into eating, and hasn't been herself. Without Mara, Greta has no one to take her to recording class. It was starting to click with people now that what I was saying made real sense. Sixth was Julie Kennedy, who was not allowed to enter this year because her grades fell. Her grades fell because her after-school tutor received something nasty in the mail and left town. 6 entrances for this competition, all taken out by apparently unconnected situations. Too many coincidences, entirely too many. So who came next? Called a voice from the back of the hall. The obvious question. I was hoping someone would ask it. I paused before answering. Whatever I said next would change my life. Someone I liked a lot would be hurt forever. But there was no chance that I was wrong. I knew who the guilty party was. May Devereaux, I whispered into the wire mesh of the microphone head. A collective ooh rose from the audience. I didn't blame this. This was good stuff for €5. Fletcher, what are you saying? May had pushed her way on the stage. With her dance costume, blonde hair, and wobbling lip, she looks the picture of innocence. I would have less trouble convincing a Trekkie that Spock was an impulsive hothead. Still, I only needed to convince one person. Are you saying that I did all those things? Is that what you're saying? I turned, blocking the sparkle of her costume from my vision. What I was doing was cruel, but it had to be done. This had to stop tonight. That's exactly what I mean, May. She took a step to the left, her sequins glittering. Why can't you look at me, Fletcher? Is it because you know I'm innocent? Innocent, I scoffed. Not too innocent to set up everyone who beat you in the last year's show. But they got me too. My lucky costume. Maybe, I countered, but you're still here. She didn't answer, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she was going for the innocent, hurt look. I plowed on. May's credibility had to be torn into shreds. It was the only way this could work. Take a look, everyone. Lovely May Devereaux, as pretty as her name. The perfect student and a doting daughter. But behind this facade is someone who will do anything to get her way. Being 7th in a competition was never going to be good enough for May. After last year's humiliation, she plotted her strategy for months. It was a simple enough plan. Take out everyone who finished higher than her. May had turned so pale that she seemed almost translucent. So Mercedes' mini disc is stolen. Johnny and Pierce lose their decks. The Chocolate Phantom visits Mara Myrna. The list goes on. But there was one problem. Master Red Sharkey. Red had already been in more trouble than May can throw at him. Red has backbone and will not be broken. His family can't be used against him. May is getting desperate. She's running out of ideas. Then one day her cousin April, who has her own scheme, hires me to track down a fictitious lock of Shauna Beiderbecke's hair. It was perfect. I paused for breath. You could have heard a potato chip crunch. But it didn't, because this drama was more absorbing than any snack, which is saying a lot for school kids. April and May sent me on Red Sharky's tail like a good doggy. I got assaulted, Red gets blamed, and May is the least likely suspect. Perfect. May found the resolve to step forward under the lights, her costume shimmering like a disco ball. You do know I'm only 10, don't you, Fletcher? And anyway, you can't prove any of this, she said with some steel behind her trembling voice. Proof. The hole in my case, a rather significant hole. But this was all part of the plan. I don't need proof because everyone in this hall knows it's true. Your life as the popular princess is over. What I was doing was cruel, terrible. I hated myself. I wish there was another way. May retreated in the face of this onslaught. She mouthed my name, but no sound came out. You had more than most, May, but it wasn't enough. You had to have the talent show crowd as well, even if it meant climbing over your own schoolmates. Some of your victims have been friends since kindergarten. How could you? She didn't, said a voice from the crowd. The outburst I had been praying for. The sound of that simple sentence was like the clanging of a victory bell. I knew with absolute certainty my theory had been correct. It was as if a ghost had taken on flesh and revealed himself to the world. No, I said, turning to face the man who had left his seat and was standing red-faced in the aisle. She didn't. You did. Isn't that right, Mr. Devereaux? May's father, Gregor Devereaux, looked back at his seat as if he had no idea why he wasn't still in it. His eyes swiveled to meet mine. To meet mine, and they were the eyes of a guilty man. Everything slotted into place with the precision of a laser-cut jigsaw. And the true thrill of detective and the true thrill of detection sent a shiver through my senses. For a moment, everything dissolved but the truth. Devereaux pointed a finger at me. You just leave my little girl. You just shut up, you little... Unfinished sentences, I said, a sure sign of guilt. No one moved. No one spoke. Mothers clamped their hands over infants' mouths. It took me a long time to see it, I said, stepping to the lip of the stage. I was so stupid for so long. It had to be you, Mr. Devereaux. Call me Gregor, said May's father automatically. Everything pointed to May because she was the one to benefit. But if she didn't do it herself, and I never for a moment believed that she did, then who would want her to benefit? Who? Her father, of course. Gregor Devereaux tried to laugh, but no sound came from his mouth. Fletcher, you're disturbed. Everyone knows it. You're a fugitive, for heaven's sake. Reasonable enough words, but the delivery was hollow. I pointed a rigid finger straight at his heart. You stole the needles. You sent the package. You left the chocolate. It was all you. On a crusade to prove to the wife what walked out on you, that you could raise May on your own. A pushy father who refuses to accept the fact that his daughter could not dance. She can dance, blurted Devereaux. She can, like her mother used to. All May needs is some encouragement, a confidence boost. Daddy? May was center stage now, her eyes wide and wet. Tell them it's not true. Tell me. Gregory Devereaux realized what he was saying, how close he was to a confession. He closed his eyes for a second, collecting himself. When he reopened them, they were sincere and almost merry. "Of course it's not true," he said, smiling in fatherly reassurance. "I care about your dancing, of course, Princess, but that's all. I would never do anything, never hurt anyone." May was convinced. Of course she was. It was her daddy. "There," she said to me, "I hate you, Fletcher." My heart quailed, but I forged ahead. May had the motive and the opportunity, but there were a few pieces of the puzzle that just didn't fit until you showed up on my radar, Mr. Devereaux. "Oh, you have radar now," joked Gregor, but nobody laughed. "First there were the strange footprints left in my garden by the one who attacked me. Giant-like footprints. Then I realized that the marks were not made by feet alone, but by knee pads and toes. The kind of marks that could be made by an adult kneeling down, and an adult pretending to be a child wearing gardening pads. I see there are faint strap marks on the knees of your pants, Gregor. Are you wearing the same pants tonight?" "Ridiculous," scoffed Mr. Devereaux. "Maybe," I said, "but my father uses a homemade fertilizer, an absolutely unique concoction. I am sure the police lab can match any soil from your soles to the fertilizer in our garden." Gregor Devereaux was blinking fast and sweating, his bangs flopped into his eyes, and he pushed them back, flattening the hair on his head. "Nothing," he said, appealing to the audience for support. "None of this means a thing. The delusions of a strange boy. We've all known it for years, haven't we? We've all known that half moon is not quite right. A midget detective? Please." He was right. People did think I was strange. They still do. But that didn't change the truth. But let's get back to Mercedes' music. The missing mini disc. We found your footprints under her window, and there was also evidence of a frenzied search, as though the thief had lost something. But what could he have lost? Hundreds of chairs squeaked as the audience leaned in. I forgot the most basic rule of investigation. The most obvious explanation is usually the right one. The only thing you could have lost was the thing you came to find, the mini-disc that you had overheard Mercedes talking about so many times. "Fantasy," bellowed Mr. Devereaux. "Pure fantasy." But his blink rate jumped as though it were wired to the power grid. I was right. You lost the mini-disc during the break-in. I saw the flower bed outside May's window. It was torn apart. You had no option but to return home and hope the mini-disc didn't turn up before the talent show. My big speech had ended with a whimper rather than a bang. My entire theory was bordering on the incredible. I knew it, and so did everyone else. I needed a trump card, and Mr. Devereaux provided it. He strode purposefully down the center aisle, vaulting onto the stage. He speared me with a withering look and grabbed the microphone. The Sharkies were elbowed from his path. Herod stumbled at Gregor's feet, remaining there for a moment before joining his sister in the wings. "How much more of this insanity are we supposed to stomach?" he asked. "You all know me, Frank Seamus. We play squash together. Is any of this the least bit credible? I don't even know why I'm bothering to defend myself. Come on, honey, let's go home." I motioned to Red, and he tossed me his microphone. "One more thing, Mr. Devereaux, the mini-disc." Gregor blew his fuse. "What about it?" he bellowed. "Conjured it up out of thin air, haven't you? Give it a rest. Haven't you caused enough pain? Think of your parents. Those pants you're wearing with the curious strap marks in the corduroy? Black with plenty of pockets. Big cuffs, too. I'm guessing they are your sneaky pants." "Work pants," spat Gregor. He rolled his eyes. "Why am I explaining this to you?" I took a step closer. If a small disc were to fall out of a person's pocket, it could easily slip into one of those cuffs. You're right-handed, so in the right cuff. If the disc was there to survive the washing machine, it could still be there. Devereaux's laugh was short and sharp, like the warning bark of a territorial dog. Get away from me, Moon. I'm not subjecting myself to search from you. I met his wild gaze with a steady one of my own. Just 1 second to bend down. 1 second, and everyone knows I'm a lunatic. Shove your second, Fletcher, and shove your accusations. I am sick of being the polite, responsible adult. I'll say what we're all thinking. Your parents have to take a firmer line with you. May moved toward her father. He smiled triumphantly and reached out a hand. She did not take it. I'll show him, Daddy, she said. She knelt by his right pant cuff and quickly found the disc tucked in there. Oh, Daddy, she sighed with a sorrow that squeezed my heart. Gregor was flabbergasted. That's impossible. That can't be. What? I hammered home my advantage. There it is, the stolen disc. Explain that, Gregor, if you can. May's father took the disc in a trembling hand. His face was wrinkled with incomprehension. May, you have to believe me. The words wouldn't come. His mouth churned uselessly for several moments until he finally blurted, Don't you understand? I wasn't even wearing these pants that night. The room was silent for an instant as everyone digested the importance of this statement. Then Red raised both arms to the crowd. Confession, he roared, and the crowd went crazy. This was real entertainment. Gregor looked around. You attacked me, I accused through the commotion. Gregor looked around desperately as if he was expecting a rescue from somewhere. I attacked a garden gnome, he shouted. You came out of nowhere. I would never hurt anyone. All I wanted to do was destroy the gnome and leave Red's hurl so that he would be blamed. That's all. May, you have to believe me. In the eye of the hullabaloo, tears dripped from Gregor's eyes as his daughter turned from him. The tears turned to ice as he took 3 quick steps across the stage and grabbed me by the shoulders. You don't know what you've done, he growled. May is fragile. She is still recovering from her mother's leaving. I wriggled, but Gregory had me in his strong gardener hands. Red was the first to react. He hurtled across the stage, tackling Devereaux behind the waist. But he was only 13, and Devereaux was a 6-foot-plus plank of fitness. Red bounced off him like a bird off a window. All the impact did was remind Devereaux where he was. Stay back, he warned, hoisting me off the ground. Let me think. Give me room. I don't think now that Gregory Devereaux was in his right mind on that evening. I don't think he was aware that he was dangling my feet over the orchestra pit. Cassidy took a few steps on stage, palms raised. Come on, Devereaux. God knows none of us are fond of Half Moon. Pain in the behind that he is, but you have to put the boy down before you drop him. In a second, Cassidy, said Devereaux calmly. I just need to find the right word to explain things to May. He pulled a face. Your mother will have a field day with this. My future at this point was uncertain, and I had only myself to blame. I'd pushed a man over the edge in uncertain circumstances. I heard something. I heard the sharp smack of metal striking wood. The noise came again and again, increasing in intensity until a rhythm was established. The pressure on my shoulders eased slightly. May, whispered Devereaux. I realized what the noise was. Dancing shoes. May was dancing with tears streaming down her cheeks. May Devereaux was performing her competition routine to distract her own father. Devereaux was instantly transfixed. The real world was forgotten. The current crisis took a back seat to the talent competition. Come on, honey, he said. Head up, back straight. May danced like she had never done before, somehow finding coordination in her flashing feet. The sound of her tap shoes silenced the crowd as they realized that something special was happening. Gregor's head bobbed along with the routine. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and heel toe. Fingers crossed now, honey. Gregory held his breath. The kick was coming. May had never managed this in her life. Tonight she did, her legs flashing straight as rulers. 4 feet up, heels smacked together on the descent. She finished with a deep bow. Gregor Devereaux ran across the stage, dragging me with him. He glared at the judges, seated in the first row. Well, he demanded. Sister Julia B. Withers, the chief judge, looked to her co-judges for support. When none came, she spoke haltingly. Excellent presentation, nice technique and form, impressive flick heel. I would say definitely first place. First, no doubt about it. Gregory's face cracked with relief. A mountain of stress lifted from his shoulders. You won, honey. We won. It's all worth it. All the practice, all the everything. He turned back to the judges. Where's the trophy? Isn't there a trophy? Sister Julia picked up the marble trophy at her feet and passed it into the waiting hands of Gregor Devereaux. Gregor's hands were empty and waiting to receive it, because he had cast me aside. Cassidy should have had him, or any one of 100 adults in the wings, but they didn't, because my mother never gave them the chance. The text of my presence had reached her cell phone from one of the mother's circles. She had immediately jumped into the car and driven to the hall. At the exact moment Gregor dropped me, she was barging through the crowd in the wings. When Mom realized what was going on, she pulled a curtain rail sampler from her shoulder bag and charged Gregory Devereaux, who had an 8-inch and 80-pound advantage over her. Devereaux was in the act of hoisting May's trophy when a foot length of cherry wood struck him on the temple. Swung with the strength of motherhood, Gregory pirouetted once, then dropped like a sack of stones. May flung herself on his chest, sobbing. I'm sorry, I said to the one girl who ever liked me. It was the only way. May raised her head long enough to say the words that had haunted my dreams since that night. What my daddy did was bad, she said, her bleary eyes like dark stone underwater. But what you did tonight was worse. Maybe I could have persuaded her otherwise, but my mother smothered me in her arms, and the moment was lost. Now it is too late, and she hates me for life. Join the club. Epilogue. My name is Moon, Fletcher Moon, and I'm not sure if I want to be a detective anymore. It has been almost a month since the talent competition fiasco. It was big news for a while, thanks to over 100 amateur video and phone recordings. I even had the national news. Made the national news. So much for undercover work. Not that it matters. I was finished with investigative work. May was hurt, wounded. I never wanted to do that to someone again. Her mother had left her, and now, in a way, her father was gone too. Gregor Devereaux was no longer the shining knight that every dad should be, all because of me. My parents read me the riot act and watched me so closely that I couldn't take on any cases even if I wanted to. Mom checked my room a dozen times a night to make sure that I was there. Dad wrote a daily timetable for me filled with menial tasks, the theory being that I would be too exhausted to even think about detection. And of course, they confiscated my badge. I spent my time faking the symptoms of post-trauma stress disorder to avoid facing everyone. I walked around staring into space, hoping that nobody would try to strike up a conversation. This tactic proved successful. My sister Hazel was very happy with the new me and was making a documentary on my progress. At school, most people left me alone. Even the remains of les jeunes étudiants were afraid to stir up the hornet's nest. Sergeant Mert Horahan was the closest thing I had to an ally. He stood up to Chief Gwynn, insisting that the investigation against me be scrapped. Of course, Gregor Devereaux is suing me for slander, but his case has about as much hope before a jury as a house of straw has before the big bad wolf. especially since Devereaux made a full confession at the police station. His lawyer advised him not to press charges against my mother for assault, as he had just been threatening her son. Mert came over to the house when things had settled down. "How are you holding up, Sherlock?" he asked when he had finally managed to get me alone at the kitchen table. "Sherlock Holmes is a creation," I said sullenly. "At the end of the book, he moves on to the next adventure. I can't move on. I live here." Mert leaned back on the chair, popping a jacket button. "That was a nice trick, planting the mini-disc in Gregor Devereaux's cuff. Luckily, he didn't spot the plant." "It was an Elvis track from the hall sound system. Herod did it when Devereaux pushed him over. We had it set up. Totally illegal, of course. It's entrapment. I don't care about procedure anymore. I'm finished with law and order." Mert sighed. "There was once this poet fellow by the name of Keats," he stated. Mert was full of surprises. "What about Keats?" "Well now, young Keats was well known for immortal lines, and my own particular favorite is 'Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know.' You see what I mean?" "I'm not sure. What do you think you mean?" Mert spun his cap onto the kitchen table like a frisbee. Nice to see a spark of the smart aleck we all know and love. What I think I mean is that truth is priceless, or to give it the Sergeant Mert Horahan treatment, tell me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, or go directly to jail. When you exposed Gregor Devereaux, you gave everyone in that hall the gift of truth. May didn't see it as a gift. She hates me." Mert snagged an apple from the fruit bowl. "Look," he said, "life is like an apple." I raised my head out of my hands to look at the apple. This should be good. Mert stared at the apple for several moments and ate it in half a dozen bites. "Okay, I can't finish that simile, but give me some credit for the Keats. Come on, I looked that up on the internet." "You better change your police site password," I said guiltily. Mert gave me the eye. "Why do you say that?" I avoided his gaze. "I guessed it. Blue flew too obvious." I think you're right. Anyway, better you guessed it than someone dangerous. There are people who would have a field day with all that information." I nodded listlessly. "Come on, Fletcher, give me a smile. May despises you now. She blames you for what happened. But do you really think that this is your fault? You did the right thing, however unorthodox your methods." Truth is beauty. It was a few weeks later that I was sitting on my own in the lunch hall. Life was rolling along with no regards for my personal gloom. Kids were chatting, flirting, fighting, and occasionally eating. Didn't these people realize how depressed I was? I had turned my back on two things that were very important to me: my chosen profession and an unlikely friend, Red. It had been awkward between us since the talent competition. We had been partners, I suppose, maybe friends, but now I was back in my own world and he was still in his. I didn't even look like a Sharky anymore. The earring was gone and the fake tan had worn off, and there were only patches of red left in my hair. So maybe Half Moon wasn't tough enough to be a friend to Red Sharky. It was a pity. I could use a friend. Then, as if my thoughts had summoned him, Red appeared. He slid along the opposite bench, looking as he always did, harried and cool. His fierce hair stood in shocked stalagmites, and his freckles had multiplied in the unseasonably autumn heat. "Half Moon," he whispered, "I'm in trouble this time, real trouble. I'm sunk, done for, up the creek. You have to help me." Red Sharky was actually asking for help? This must be serious. "What happened?" "I'm not supposed to talk to you, by the way." Red ducked his chin an inch from the tabletop as though someone was watching. "Forget that. This is important. Life or death stuff. We can worry about your parents later. You are the only one who can help me." I could feel eyes on me. I looked up and spotted Hazel standing by the juice vendor, pointing her video camera at me, hands on hips. Her body language was saying, "You are so busted." But then her gaze met mine and her features softened. She put away the camera and placed a hand over each eye. See no evil. For some reason, Hazel had decided to give me a break. Maybe she could sense that I needed one. "Hello, by the way," I said. "How's the family?" "Good. Papa is delighted with me. A Sharky who was genuinely innocent. Oh, and Roddy wants to be a detective now. How long will that last, I don't know." He glanced up nervously as though he half expected someone to be watching. "Now my problem. Will you help me?" I felt a brushstroke of dread coating my stomach. "I don't know, Red. After our last case—" Red slapped the table. People jumped. "Snap out of it, Half Moon. I need help. I need the truth, and the truth is your speciality. What are you going to do? Mope for the rest of your life?" Red was right. He needed my help, and I should give it without a selfish hesitation. "Okay, tell me quick before I chicken out." "Excellent," said Red, grinning his pirate grin. "This is a real stumper. Someone will write books about this someday. Last year I did some work on a country estate. A summer job for this American guy who's inherited a title." Summer job, American nobleman? Okay. It was exciting. So far, classic mystery setup. For a moment, my depression lifted. "So the American family has this curse on it." "A curse. No such thing as far as detectives are concerned, but they can have a devastating effect on superstitious people. According to this curse, every lord of the manor gets done in by a fox." I began to sniff a rodent. "A fox?" "Yes, big fox, enormous. Roams the moor, sniffing for the American guy. Just dying to take a chunk out of his backside." "Wait a minute," I said, unable to swallow a smile. "You're making this up, or rather stealing it from Arthur Conan Doyle. I believe the story you are butchering is The Hound of Baskerville." Red was smiling back at me. "Okay, I'm not in trouble, but tell me your heart didn't start beating for the first time in a month." I couldn't deny it, so I didn't. "You're a detective, Fletcher. That's what you're good at. My dad took my badge." Red wagged a finger at me. "Just because you don't have a badge doesn't mean you don't have a badge," he said, trying to sound wise. And strangely, I understood exactly what he meant. Red cleared his throat nervously. "Anna Sewell, the girl who wrote Black Beauty, said that with cruelty and oppression it is everyone's business to interfere when they see it. Which means that you were dead right to stand up to Gregor Devereux, who's certainly cruelly oppressing us." "Have you been talking to Mert?" I asked suspiciously. "Yes," admitted Red. "I've been helping him out with a few cases since you've been out of action. He says that I'm not as reliable as you. Well, what he actually said was that you may be thick, but I make you look like a certified genius." Typical Mert. "I thought you might like to know that Ernie Boyle is back in school, so some good has come of all our meddling." "Really?" "Yeah, he's disgusted. Oh, and April Devereux's parents are moving her to a private boarding school in Dublin after she stays on the farm. Apparently some of her friends here were having a bad influence on her." "That's rich. Tell me about it." We sat silently for a moment. Red was waiting for me to make a decision. I was trying to make it. "So, are you volunteering to help with all this crime solving?" Red was insulted. "Help? We're partners, Fletcher, or we would be if you hadn't been ignoring me for the past month." "I didn't know. It's not as if—" Red winked. "Unfinished sentences, a sure sign of guilt." "Sorry, Red, I haven't been myself. I've been trying to be someone else, and it hasn't worked out. We should have a name for our agency." "Our agency?" "Yes, our. You can be the boss, the brainy one, and I'll be the good-looking one who takes all the risks." I felt my life's breath returning after months absent. "We would have to be low profile, work on the QT until Mom and Dad were ready for the idea. But we would be a good team. We have already broken one case wide open. What about crime busters? Red was saying. Or junior B men. What? Names for our agency, remember? Red squinted at me craftily. You've already been thinking about this, haven't you? You already have a name. Let me guess. Moon Investigations. I grinned at my new partner. You're half right, I said. So that's the end of the story, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope all of you enjoyed it too.